Everyone knows the Munsters as TV's most lovable monster family, but in 1965, one episode nearly brought the entire show to an end. From illegal props to dangerously daring stunts, this particular episode's production was riddled with controversy and chaos. What transpired that day was so shocking that the footage was locked away, never to be seen again until now. In this story, we uncover the shocking truth behind why this episode was never aired, and why the cast kept silent about it for decades. The concept for the Munsters didn't begin in the 1960s, as many assume, but actually in the 1940s. Animator Bob Clampett, renowned for his work on Looney Tunes, first drummed up a cartoon about a quirky monster family. He toiled over the idea for years, but it never took off. The concept sat on the back burner, awaiting the right moment to come to life. That moment came in the early 1960s when comedy writers Alan Burns and Chris Hayward, famous for Rocky and Bullwinkle, pitched a similar concept. Drawing inspiration from Charles Addams's New Yorker cartoons, which showcased a creepy yet lovable family, Burns and Hayward sought to take the idea further. But instead of creating something completely original, they turned to Universal Studios. After all, Universal owned the rights to iconic monsters like Frankenstein and Dracula. It was a golden opportunity to bring these beloved characters into a family sitcom. That decision set the stage for the show's success. Herman Munster transformed into a Frankenstein-style father, complete with bolts in his neck and a clumsy yet lovable personality. Grandpa became a comedic take on Count Dracula, while the family lived in a rundown mansion on a quiet suburban street. To them, they were just another average family, one that terrified their neighbors. The contrast was where the comedy lay. The show's writers, Norm LeBeau and Ed Hose, brought this concept to life with the first pilot episode, Love Thy Monster, which introduced the characters and established the show's satirical tone. The Munsters weren't trying to be frightening, they simply wanted to live like any typical American family. That simplicity was at the heart of the humor. The timing couldn't have been better. In the early 1960s, classic monster movies were experiencing a revival. Universal had begun re-releasing its old horror films, and audiences were rediscovering their love for these legendary characters. The idea of combining monster lore with sitcom humor was a perfect fit for TV's evolving landscape. Universal played a pivotal role in shaping the series. Since they own the rights to the classic monster designs, the show had an authentic connection to Hollywood's iconic horror films. Universal also provided top-tier makeup and special effects. Bud Westmore, a legendary makeup artist, was tasked with transforming the actors into real-life monsters. The attention to detail ensured that Herman, Grandpa, and the rest of the family looked like authentic movie monsters, while still maintaining the expressions needed for comedy. Beyond the physical look of the show, Universal's influence extended to its tone. Rather than mocking the horror genre, the Munsters celebrated it. Fans of classic monsters got to enjoy all the references, while general audiences could laugh at the family's hilarious, everyday problems. At its core, the Munsters was a satire of suburban life, where the family saw themselves as completely normal. They ate dinner together, went to work and school, and dealt with typical family issues. But to the outside world, their monstrous appearances made them a constant source of fear and confusion. One episode exemplified the show's ability to poke fun at traditional family sitcoms. In it, Lily encourages Herman to have a heart-to-heart with Eddie, mimicking the father-son talk seen on shows like Father Knows Best and Leave It to Beaver. But Herman's advice is so outlandish that the scene becomes a punchline. This play on sitcom cliches made the Munsters feel fresh and fun. Meanwhile, Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis, who portrayed Herman and Grandpa, were more than just co-stars, they were the beating heart of the show. Their journey to the Munsters began years earlier on Car 54, Where Are You?, where they played mismatched New York police officers. Their chemistry was undeniable, and audiences loved them together. This real-life bond carried over when the Munsters began production in early 1964, with both actors being the first to be cast in their respective roles. Transforming Fred Gwynne into Herman Munster was no easy feat. Gwynne wore heavy boots with 4-inch lifts, layers of padding, and a 40 to 50-pound costume that made moving a challenge. The heat from the studio lights made things worse, and on one particularly grueling day of filming, he lost 10 pounds. Despite the physical toll, Gwyn poured everything into his performance, giving Herman a deep voice, a goofy laugh, and an endearing childlike charm that would become one of TV's most unforgettable characters. Off-screen, his friendship with Al Lewis remained just as strong, carrying through long after the show ended. Casting wasn't always so smooth, though. Originally, the matriarch of the family was named Phoebe and played by Joan Marshall. However, Phoebe's resemblance to Morticia Addams from the competing show The Addams Family raised concerns. Fearing that audiences would confuse the two series, executives made the decision to replace Phoebe with Lily Munster. The new Lily was played by Yvonne De Carlo, known for her dramatic roles in films like The Ten Commandments. Initially, Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis had doubts about her comedic abilities, but De Carlo proved them wrong. She was given the simple direction to play Lily like a classic 1950s housewife, but with a gothic twist. De Carlo's elegance and charm perfectly balanced Herman's goofy nature, and she quickly became a vital part of the Munster family dynamic. Butch Patrick, who played Eddie Munster, wasn't the first actor cast in the role. The original, unaired pilot featured a bratty Eddie played by Nate Happy Durman, but the character didn't mesh with the show's lighthearted tone. When Patrick took over, he brought a more lovable and mischievous personality to Eddie, making him more relatable to young viewers. This shift helped the show appeal to families across America. The role of Marilyn Munster also underwent a change. Beverly Owen originally played Marilyn but left after just 13 episodes, as she had been unhappy with the role from the beginning. After leaving the show, producers brought in Pat Priest to take over the role, and she fit in perfectly. Marilyn was the only character who looked like a normal young woman, yet she never found her family's monstrous appearances odd. This contrast led to plenty of humorous moments, and Marilyn's presence helped give viewers someone to relate to, making her just as beloved as the rest of the family. The Munster Mansion at 1313, Mockingbird Lane, was more than just a backdrop. It was a character in its own right. The mansion looked like something straight out of an old horror film, but it had a strange charm that made it feel like home. Its design took inspiration from Victorian-era mansions, particularly those in San Francisco, with a spookier, more gothic touch to fit the family's heritage. The exterior of the house combined a real building with Hollywood set modifications. The interior was constructed on a soundstage, with every detail designed to enhance the show's humor: a grand staircase, dusty chandeliers, and the basement laboratory, where Grandpa's experiments often went awry. The house also featured secret passages and hidden rooms, which frequently became part of the story, adding to the show's whimsical tone. Despite all of the behind-the-scenes magic, life on set wasn't without its challenges. The cast faced long makeup sessions, heavy costumes, and the difficulty of performing under hot lights. Gwyn's costume, in particular, made even simple movements a struggle. De Carlo's beautiful dresses, while elegant, were hard to move in. And then there was the Munsters drag car, Dragula, a Frankenstein-inspired dragster built from a fiberglass coffin. The creation of this car would lead to a series of legal and logistical headaches, setting the stage for the infamous incident that nearly doomed the show. The legend of Dragula remains one of the wildest stories in the Munsters' history, and its creation was just one of the many elements that contributed to the chaotic production. But while this episode and the stunts it entailed almost cost the show its future, they remain an unforgettable part of the Munsters' legacy. The unaired pilot of the Munsters, titled My Fair Monster, played a crucial role in shaping the direction of the series. Filmed in late 1963, this pilot was produced to sell the show to networks, and although it differed significantly from the version that eventually aired, it laid the foundation for what the show would become. One of the most unexpected elements of this early version was that it was shot in color, which, at the time, was becoming the norm for TV as the industry was transitioning to more vibrant productions. This made sense for the pilot, but when the show was officially picked up, the decision was made to film it in black and white. This shift not only saved money, but also gave the series a nostalgic horror film aesthetic, echoing the classic monster movies produced by Universal. Filming took place on Universal Studios backlit, using the same suburban street that had been featured in Leave It to Beaver. This was part of the joke. The Munsters were meant to be portrayed as a typical American family, despite living in a creepy, haunted house with a pet dragon. This stark contrast made the premise even funnier. The pilot script was written by Norm Lebman and Ed Hose, while Norman Abbott directed. The pilot had all the essential components, but several elements needed tweaking before it was ready for television. One of the most significant differences between the pilot and the final version of The Munsters was the casting. In the pilot, Joan Marshall played Phoebe Munster, a character that was later renamed Lily and ultimately portrayed by Yvonne De Carlo. Marshall's portrayal of Phoebe bore a strong resemblance to Morticia Addams from the Addams Family, which led producers to rethink the role. They wanted Lily to be spooky, yes, but also warm and motherly, a balance that was better struck with De Carlo's casting. Eddie Munster, too, was very different in the pilot. Played by Nate Derman, Eddie's character was much more aggressive, snarling and acting wild, with a mean streak that made him seem more like an actual monster than a mischievous child. When the show moved forward, the producers replaced him with Butch Patrick, who brought a more playful and relatable quality to the character. While Eddie was still a werewolf boy, Patrick's portrayal made him feel less like a creature from a horror film and more like a real, lovable sitcom kid. Herman and Grandpa Munster, however, remained mostly unchanged from the pilot. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis had already been cast as these iconic characters, and their portrayals were already well established. However, Herman's character was slightly different in the pilot. He wasn't as goofy or lovable yet. He had a deeper voice, and his demeanor was more serious, resembling the classic Frankenstein monster. This was later adjusted when the series was picked up, softening Herman's personality to make him more humorous and charming. The tone of the pilot was also notably different. While it did have the comedy, it leaned more heavily into horror elements. Even the music reflected this, with the pilot's theme song featuring a surf rock style, which gave the show a playful energy. However, this didn't quite match the spooky vibe that the producers ultimately wanted, so the final version of the theme was changed to a brass-heavy arrangement that would go on to become one of the most recognizable TV themes in history. Despite these differences, the pilot did its job in helping Universal Studios sell the Munsters to networks. It demonstrated how horror and comedy could be effectively mixed in a family sitcom. CBS was intrigued but requested some changes, including a shift to black and white filming and a stronger focus on comedy. These changes ultimately contributed to the show's success, and today, the unaired pilot is available on DVD, offering fans a rare glimpse into how the show evolved. The Munsters was not just a comedy about a quirky monster family, it also conveyed deeper messages about acceptance and the meaning of being different. The Munsters looked scary, but they were kind, loving, and completely normal in their own eyes. In the eyes of the world around them, however, things were different. One episode, Operation Herman, which aired in 1965, perfectly captured this theme. In the episode, Eddie Munster has a tonsillectomy and is resting in the hospital, but Herman, being the devoted father he is, wants to visit him. The problem is that Herman's towering, Frankenstein-like figure makes sneaking into the hospital nearly impossible. What follows is classic Munsters humor, complete with misunderstandings, slapstick, and hospital staff believing Herman is a patient who has wandered off. But beneath the comedic chaos, there's a deeper moment when Lily suggests that Herman have a heart-to-heart with Eddie, referencing shows like Father Knows Best. Herman, in his usual clueless but lovable way, responds that these talks are usually handled by Donna Reed on The Donna Reed Show. This small joke reflects how the Munsters wasn't trying to present a perfectly polished, all-American family sitcom, but rather something that understood what it felt like to be out of place. This theme of being different, and the challenges that come with it, appeared in multiple episodes. In My Fair Monster, a neighbor complains that the neighborhood was perfect until the Munsters moved in. This line was played for laughs, but it also subtly reflected a real issue in 1960s America. Many families faced discrimination simply for being different. In another episode, Monster Masquerade, the idea was taken even further when Marilyn Munster, the only normal member of the family, introduces her boyfriend to her parents. When they meet Marilyn's family, they immediately reject her because they are monsters. The twist in this episode is that Marilyn, who looks normal, is the one who stands out in her family. To the outside world, she is the odd one out, while her family, despite their monstrous appearances, are loving and supportive. For a lighthearted sitcom, this was a bold and direct moment where the message of acceptance was delivered honestly and without a joke to soften it. The Munsters wasn't just a show about monsters living in a normal world. It was about how society treats those who are different. The show used humor to address serious issues, striking a chord with its audience. Despite its unconventional premise, The Munsters became a big hit, ranking number 18 in the Nielsen ratings alongside shows like Gilligan's Island. In 1965, the show was even nominated for a Golden Globe for Best TV Show, a rare honor for a comedy with such a unique concept. The show's impact continued long after it went off the air, with multiple TV Land Award nominations recognizing its enduring legacy. One of those awards acknowledged the change in casting when Pat Priest replaced Beverly Owen as Marilyn Munster. Despite the recasting of a major character, the show remained strong and continued to be beloved by audiences. The legacy of the Munsters stretches far beyond its original 1960s run. Over the years, spin-offs, films, and reboots have kept the characters alive, proving that the spooky yet wholesome charm of the Munster family has never truly faded. One of the most notable follow-ups was The Munsters Today, which aired from 1988 to 1991. Instead of continuing directly from the original series, it explained that Grandpa had accidentally put the family into a deep sleep for 22 years. The show took the family on an adventure to England, complete with scheming relatives, a hidden treasure, and a drag race. Fred Gwynne, Yvonne DiCarlo, and Al Lewis all returned to reprise their roles, maintaining the spirit of the original series. Efforts to revive the Munsters continued with several made-for-TV movies. The Munsters' Revenge, 1981, brought most of the original cast back together but didn't spark enough interest for a full revival. Later attempts to modernize the Munsters included an idea to relocate the family to Brooklyn, which was quickly abandoned. The most recent effort came in 2022 when filmmaker Rob Zombie released his version of the Munsters. Zombie's film leaned into campy humor and an exaggerated, colorful style. The film divided audiences, with some fans appreciating its nostalgic feel while others were less impressed. What remains undeniable, though, is the unforgettable charm of the Munster family. Herman Munster, portrayed by Fred Gwynne, became an enduring symbol of the show's unique blend of humor and heart. Despite his Frankenstein-like appearance, Herman was a lovable and goofy father figure, proving that even monsters can be endearing. His distinctive laugh and childlike enthusiasm have been parroted in countless other shows and films, further cementing his place in pop culture. Although The Munsters and The Addams Family aired around the same time and had very different tones, The Munsters being more lighthearted and The Addams Family leaning into dark humor, both shows influenced future television. The Munsters struck a balance of horror and comedy that paved the way for shows like What We Do in the Shadows, which blends vampire lore with absurd humor, and Stranger Things, which mixes supernatural elements with heartfelt family dynamics. At its core, The Munsters was more than just a show about a monster family living in a normal world. It was about acceptance, difference, and how we view those who don't fit the mold. Through its humor, it tackled complex themes and left a lasting mark on television history.